Is there a tiny bit of you, or maybe a large part of you, that wishes Nicola Sturgeon wasn't coming to Parliament today?
No, not at all. She's a very good parliamentarian. She's got a good contribution to make, and therefore not surprised that she's coming back to Parliament. And obviously, she's been there for a number of weeks already since stepping down as leader of the SNP and stepping down as First Minister.
Warm words for her, but she's just been arrested and released without charge following questioning, obviously. Do you think you're right to be welcoming her with such open arms?
Well, I don't know what you mean she's coming back to Parliament. She's been released, as you say, without charge. She's going to get on with the job of representing her constituents now. Of course, get on with the job of representing my constituents and making sure I'm leading the country as the First Minister of Scotland. That's a job that I've got to do, and that's why I'm focused on, for example, making sure we do everything we can to reduce poverty, child poverty in particular, making sure we're reducing those NHS waiting times, making sure we're doing everything in our gift to grow the economy. And on that, I'm delighted just in the last 24, 48 hours there's been an excellent survey from Ernst & Young out showing that Scotland outpaces the UK and Europe when it comes to foreign direct investment. So that's the kind of things that I'm absolutely focused on as First Minister.
But, you know, in terms of the SNP, which you lead, the last SNP leader not to be arrested was John Swinney, who stood down 19 years ago. Of course, Nicola Sturgeon not being charged with any crime, Alex Salmond acquitted of all charges. But can you understand why a lot of voters who might agree with a lot of the SNP politics might look at you as a party and say, I have questions about some of the people involved?
I think there's no doubt, and I'm not going to insult the intelligence of your viewers to suggest otherwise, that the last few weeks and even couple of months have been really difficult for the SNP, possibly even some of the most difficult months that we faced as a party in our recent history. What I can't allow that to do, what I won't allow that to do, is distract me from the job of not just leading this party that I love and that I've been a member of for almost 20 years, but importantly and crucially leading the country at a time of great challenge. And as I've said to you already, my relentless focus will be particularly on reducing poverty and child poverty in particular. And I'm pleased just last week, again, reports coming out that an estimated 90,000 children in Scotland will be lifted out of poverty because of the actions the Scottish Government has taken. So yes, in short, to answer your question, of course people will look at recent events and there will be challenges for the SNP in regards to that. But my job as First Minister is to make sure we don't and will not lose focus of the importance of getting on with the day job, and that's what I am determined to continue to do.
Whose fault is it that the children that are being lifted out of poverty in Scotland, whose fault would you say it is that they're in that poverty in the first place? Is it the government in Westminster or is it the SNP in Scotland?
Well, first and foremost, this is entirely why the SNP, of course, is driving our case for independence forward, because there's no doubt at all that over a decade of Westminster austerity, a Tory cost of living crisis, a Westminster-imposed hard Brexit, which Labour now supports, has caused untold damage. That's before I even get into the mini-budget last year, which was an economic catastrophe. All of that, of course, is why we have to spend £3 billion of our own money from health, from transport, from education. We have to spend that mitigating the effects of Westminster. Well, I didn't get into politics to mitigate. I got into Parliament, I got into politics to transform the lives of the most vulnerable in our society. Now, we're having to try to do that with one hand tied behind our back. But even with one hand tied behind our back, we're able to lift an estimated 90,000 children out of poverty. I don't want to just lift 90,000 children out of poverty. I want to lift every single child in Scotland out of poverty. And we can only do that with the full powers of an independent nation.
I mean, you say you want to focus on the job in hand and focus on getting children out of poverty, but you've raised independence. How does discussing a vote years away, which may never happen, make a difference to people in Scotland today?
Well, I've just explained exactly how that is the case. So, first and foremost, we're getting on with that day job. That's why I can point to, as I've mentioned, the Ernst & Young survey. I can mention the reports around how many children will be lifted out of poverty because of our actions, because we are focused on that. But, of course, the reason why we have such difficult circumstances here in Scotland in relation to poverty is because of an unelected Conservative government imposing over a decade of austerity, imposing a hard Brexit that Scotland didn't vote for, imposing a cost of living crisis upon us, the economic catastrophe of the mini-budget, a government in Westminster that inflicted that damage upon Scotland. And so I suppose with independence, we get rid of unelected Conservative governments for good. And what we can do is take our own future into our own hands and make the policies that we need for this country in order to, as I say, not just reduce poverty, but I would hope eradicate poverty.
The problem that you have standing there saying that to me is that, of course, it was a democratic process. The people of Scotland were given the opportunity to vote for it, and they chose no. And for you now to stand there and say that you think it's time now to focus on asking people again, a lot of people will say that's not especially democratic. You're not listening to the democratic voices that are coming from your country.
I'm the absolute Democrat, and it's why, of course, in 2021, the last Scottish Parliament elections, we stood in a manifesto for another referendum. Of course, things have changed since 2014. The most significant change, certainly one of the most significant changes, is that hard Brexit that was imposed upon Scotland against our very will. So we have mandate after mandate after a mandate because we've won election after election after election. So it is the UK government, the Westminster government, which is denying the democratic will of the Scottish people. I stand on my manifesto. I know it's unfashionable given the behaviours we've seen from Westminster recently, but I intend to fully commit to the promises that I made in that manifesto. And one of those promises was to give the people of Scotland a choice of their own future. Now, the reason why Westminster is denying that is, of course, because they're afraid of the verdict, and so they should be.
Well, you say Westminster's denying, but it's the Supreme Court, it's the judicial system that's denied it, isn't it? It's not Westminster.
No, it's not. I'm sorry, that's wrong. That's incorrect.
It went to the court, and the courts decided that they were right.
That's absolutely incorrect. It's absolutely incorrect. Westminster denied the Scottish government, the Scottish people, the choice of a referendum. They could, as in fairness to David Cameron, he did in 2014, two governments, Scottish government, UK government, diametrically opposed to the issue of independence, but doing the right thing, respecting the democratic will of the Scottish people. And remember, we have a pro-independence majority in that Scottish Parliament right now, as I stand talking to you here today, respecting that will, getting around the table and giving the people the choice of their own future. The only reason they're not doing that is because they fear the verdict of the Scottish people. And so they should, because unelected Conservative governments, Westminster rule, has been bad for Scotland. Whether it's on our economy, whether it's in relation to poverty, it has been bad for Scotland. And therefore, it's right that we take our own decisions into our own hands.
So what's your timetable for this? When do you think we will see this independence vote? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years?
Well, it's a nice try. I mean, I would have liked it yesterday if I could have had it. But of course, Westminster government continues to deny us. So I'll be speaking to a party convention later this week. To be frank, there is no rabbit to pull out of a hat. There's no ruse that I can cook up. Of course, it is the preferred option of the SNP to have that democratic, legally binding Section 30 referendum. As Westminster continues to deny that, and you've referenced the Supreme Court judgment, the only way to break that Westminster intransigence is through the power of the people, making sure we build up as much popular support to break that logjam. And that's what I'll be saying to our party convention and more this Saturday.
And isn't that the problem for you, that the SNP has been very popular in Scotland for a number of years now, but when we see what's happening at the moment in the polls, you seem to be going into freefall. The Labour Party is rising in popularity. Is it the case that Nicola Sturgeon, a woman who's done so much to fight for independence in Scotland, could be the person that really is the death knell for the independence movement?
I don't believe that at all. What I believe is that, yes, the last couple of months have been extremely challenging for the SNP. Again, I'm not going to fool your viewers by denying that being the case. But when you look at that, even despite we've had the toughest few weeks, toughest couple of months, probably in our party's recent history, support for independence is absolutely rock solid. So we've got that solid support for independence. My job is to make sure that, of course, when these matters pass, and they will pass, of course, that we continue to build on those strong foundations that has seen us elected by the people of Scotland election after election after election. And the next national test, of course, will be that general election, and I've got every confidence that we will go into that election hoping to win.
And if you don't, if the Labour Party do a great deal better than they have done in the past, they're hoping to maybe take half of the SNP seats, what will you do? Will you stand down?
It's incredible. I've been in the job for 3 months. That must be a record. Somebody's asking me if I'll stand down, and not a single ballot has been cast. So well done to Sky News for that. Look, for me, I don't go into elections other than hoping to win. I don't go into elections hypothecating a loss. So I'll go in there with the very focused aim of winning that general election.
Humza Yousaf, I just asked the questions. You're very kind to come here and answer them. First Minister for Scotland, thank you very much.
Thank you.